and I am honored to represent the Blake Alumni Board and to welcome you all here to Breakfast at Blake Union Edition. Today, Breakfast at Blake has the privilege of hosting the recipients of the Outstanding Alumni Award, the Jenny Stevens Spirit Award, and the Alumni Athlete of the Year. But very quickly, before we get to those awards, just let me remind you that Breakfast at Blake is a great get-together, and on the third Thursday of every month we hear from exceptional members of the Blake community. We've already filled out the calendar for the 2014-15 year, and we've got a great lineup, including in October, retired NSA, CIA, and Navy officer Eugene Yates, class of 53, will be here, and in November we will hear from CNN correspondent and news anchor Poppy Harlow, class of 01. So it's going to be a great year, and we hope that you'll join us for those two events and the ones following after the new year. Well, let's get to the main event today. A couple of awards, and they are great awards going to great people. The Alumni Athlete of the Year Award honors alumni who were active in athletics at Blake and who have continued to excel in their athletic endeavors. Certainly, Jon Sturgis, class of 1994, deserves this honor. As a Blake athlete, Jon earned 4 letters in hockey and 5 in cross-country running. He was a 4-time all-conference runner and a 3-time all-conference champ in hockey. He was captain of both cross-country and hockey during his senior year. In his senior yearbook, Jon is quoted as saying, "Me go shoot pucks." I hope that quote comes from your lower school years, Jon, and not after taking English from Mr. and Mrs. Woolman. Jon went on to play hockey at Dartmouth College, where in his first game against BEC as a freshman, he scored a goal. And he was a 4-year letter winner, a 2-year All-Ivy selection, and most valuable player his senior year. Following college, Jon went on to play in the East Coast Hockey League for the Florida Everblades, the Charlotte Checkers, the Baton Rouge Kingfish. He also played professional hockey in the American Hockey League for Springfield and Hershey. And he was invited to the inaugural Minnesota Wild Rookie Camp in the year 2000. Shortly after moving back to Minnesota, Jon began his coaching career at Blake, starting with the JV hockey team, which he coached for 9 years, and soon thereafter became head coach of the boys varsity team. Jon is the 3rd Blake graduate to go on to play Division I Dartmouth hockey and then return to coach the sport at Blake, following in the footsteps of Chuck Ritchie and Rick Allen. Something about that Blake combination. In 2011 and 12, in his first season as coach, Jon led his team to an 18-10 record and a 2nd place finish in Section 2A. He was off to a great start, and we expect more great things to come, Jon. So, in addition to coaching the Blake team, he's also coaching his son in the Minnetonka program. He is an institutional trader at Piper Jaffray in the morning before he gets out of there at noon to coach these kids all day long. He is a great member of the Blake community, a great coach, and a great athlete, and we are pleased to award him and help me and congratulate him for winning the award at the 2014 Alumni Athlete of the Year, Mr. Jon Sturgis. The Jenny Stevens Spirit Award honors alumni who have devoted extraordinary time and energy to the school and have served as stalwart enthusiasts for the school and its alumni community. Martha Beery Milbery, class of 1971, certainly deserves this award, as she has always been a terrific cheerleader for Blake, literally. During her years at the upper school at Northwood, she was on the cheerleading squad supporting Blake's football and hockey teams. freshman at Simmons College, Martha learned that coaches Ritchie and Anderson were bringing the Blake hockey team to Boston to play some of the area's best high school teams. Martha quickly invited her Norfolk classmates and fellow cheerleaders, Ginger Owens and Marcia McCary, down from Middlebury. She then called the current cheerleading squad captain back here in Minneapolis and had her send their old uniforms to Boston. You guessed it, Martha and her friends who are here today not only donned their uniforms, but took to the ice between periods and performed their cheers and skating routines, splits and all. After graduating from Simmons in 1975 with a degree in environmental studies, Martha returned to Minneapolis to work on a second degree at the University of Minnesota and immediately started giving back to her alma mater, which had just merged with Blake and High. She served on the Alumni Board from 1976 to 1979 before moving away to Colorado, and upon her return, rejoined the board for another 6 years and served as board president from 2004 to 2006. One of her jobs was to recruit me to that board, and I am forever thankful for that too. Martha has been a class representative for nearly 38 years and planned each of her class reunions. She attends nearly every Blake alumni event, and I am certain that she has been to more of these breakfasts at Blake than any of the rest of us. Though that may change a bit, as she and her husband, now retired, are spending more and more time in Vail, Colorado, and they are expecting their first grandchild, but we do hope we see a lot more around here. She is here today, and let's all congratulate her for receiving the 2014 Jenny Stevens Hagen Spirit Award, Ms. Martha Beery Milbery. Probably the only member of her class that can still fit into her 1971 Norfolk class jacket, and she is wearing it today. So, who better to introduce our winners of the Alumni of the Year Award than a native of Tech City, Seattle. A couple of tech winners here today, so Ann Stephanie, would you please introduce speakers?
Right, good morning. It's wonderful to see such a full room and a lot of energy here. It's my pleasure to pay tribute and introduce our alumni of the year, brothers David Goldberg, class of 1985, and Rob Goldberg, class of 1989. As is our tradition with our honored award recipients, we first took a look at their years at Blake to learn what our school may have played in what part our school may have played in our later achievements. I see Rob kind of shaking his head. Nervous. Okay, we're going to start with Dave. The 1985 Reflections Yearbook reveals that Dave Goldberg was also known as Go-Go, Gold Barge, and Solid Gold. He claimed that in his 4 years singing with the Blakers Dozen, he only learned 2 songs. He hates tomatoes, but loves football. And he shared the following quote: "What the blank is Vetch talking about?" So maybe you can get the answer later today from Mr. Vetcher when you visit the upper school. Dave participated in football, student forum, and wrote for the upper school publications. He was a cum laude graduate. He received the English Achievement Award, the Harvard Prize Book Award, the U.S. Bank Award, and the Princess Wealth Award for outstanding scholastic achievement. From Blake, Dave went on to graduate magna cum laude from Harvard, and then with a Bachelor's of Arts degree in History and Government. So turning our sights now to the 1989 Reflections Yearbook, we learned that Rob Goldberg was also called Go-Go, as well as Gogs, Goats, and Gobot. There were references to some dubious pastimes such as tree trimming and car driving, in Kenwood, Spanish bonfire, and sleep-offs in econ. We're gratified to see that Rob opted to sit in the smart section next to NG in math. And just a little foreshadowing, probably, of the entrepreneurial spirit that he would later display. Rob played football, served on the student forum at Blake, as well as singing in the Glee Club and the Blakers Dozen. After graduating from Blake in 1989, Rob then earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in English and creative writing from the University of Wisconsin in Madison. Turning back to Dave, Dave is now CEO of SurveyMonkey. As an entrepreneur, a venture capitalist, and an industry executive, he has led and grown several online consumer businesses. With his brother Rob, Dave founded Launch Media in 1994 and led the company through its acquisition by Yahoo in 2001. Dave then served as vice president and general manager of Yahoo Music, where he directed the company's global music operation and built it to the internet's most visited music destination. In 2006, Dave was named one of Billboard magazine's top power players in digital music. Prior to joining SurveyMonkey in 2009, Dave served as an entrepreneur in residence with Benchmark Capital, where he evaluated investment opportunities and advised portfolio companies. Currently, Dave serves on the board of directors at Dashbox, Graham Holdings Company, and the nonprofit New Schools Venture Fund. Rob Goldberg has spent many years building ideas into companies. He is currently the founder and CEO of Fresno, Incorporated, a digital content studio. Prior to the creation of Fresno, Rob was the GM of Tops Digital Services, a business unit formed when he sold his company, GMG Entertainment, to Tops in 2011. Rob was the CEO of the entertainment marketing firm Gold Marketing Group, and he spent 7 years as an executive growing Launch Media with his brother Dave before it was sold to Yahoo to become Yahoo Music. Rob's entrepreneurial spirit, referenced earlier, blossomed at age 22 when he became founder and CEO of the Elise Way Trading Company, a footwear and apparel company based in Cape Town, South Africa. Currently, Rob is an angel investor, and he and his wife are active supporters of several nonprofit organizations, including Bring Change to Mind. The Outstanding Alumni Award honors alumni who have demonstrated outstanding leadership, achievement, and influence in their field or community. It is clear that Dave and Rob Goldberg, both as a team and as enterprising individuals, meet these criteria through their remarkable achievements. It is with great pride that the Blake School honors them today with this citation. For their leadership and significant contributions in the areas of technology and business, as well as their roles in advancing the opportunities for online connectivity, Blake is honored to name David Goldberg, class of '85, and Rob Goldberg, class of '89, the Outstanding Alumni of the Year for 2014. Congratulations, Dave and Rob. It is indeed my pleasure to introduce you and also present you with an engraved crystal bowl as a token of our esteem. Thanks so much.
Well, it's been a few years since we've sat up here at chapel, I think the 8th grade chapel speech is a long memory. But it's great to be back. It's great to see so many people, this is an unusual format. We are interviewing each other, so when we run out of questions, we're going to take them from you. So we'll do a little bit of asking each other some questions, and then we're going to open it up to you guys. So we'll start. Rob, we got our bios here, but
such as they are.
Such as they are. But Rob, I think his earliest entrepreneurial memory is middle school, when he convinced my mother that he needed to bring cans of pop to class, and then he sold them on the bus and kept the money.
It was a fabulous business. 100% markup. Their margin.
So I guess first question is, Rob, besides that entrepreneurial experience, what was what led you to become an entrepreneur in the first place?
I mean, I think the basis of it, I mean, I don't think you think about becoming an entrepreneur. It's not something you sort of say, I'm going to wake up and start a business or start something. I think that the biggest basis for that was probably our parents. Both my mother and my father started nonprofits. Of course, we decided to go into the for-profit world and just ignore the world and make money instead. But our parents were truly sort of leaders in that regard in terms of my mother started a nonprofit that she still runs today, almost 40 years later, and our father did that too. And I think that while it wasn't expressly discussed in our house, changing things and doing things that were new and different were sort of encouraged. And I think that's where when you see opportunities and taking advantage of opportunities, I think that's the opportunity to start something. It becomes less of a fear factor and more of an opportunity. Yeah. What would you say in terms of your basis of that?
You turn it around a bit. I mean, I think for me it was, I mean, yes, those things. I think I was working at Capitol Records in LA in 1993 and saw what was happening in the music business, saw the changes that were going to come, I guess is probably the best way to describe it. And I also just felt I needed to try running something. And at the age of 26, no one was going to let me run anything, so you have to sort of start your own thing if you want to do that. So I think I decided to start launch 6 months after I made the decision that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. It was a kind of a quick thing. I don't think I ever grew up thinking I was going to start my own company. It was more an outcome of that. And sort of the other Blake connection started with my best friend from high school, Bob Roback. We had been debate partners and been very close friends all throughout school, and we batted ideas back and forth, and then quit our jobs, raised money from friends and family. Those are the only people who are going to give you money when you don't know what you're doing. And after we told people that we wanted to get them to give us $10,000, which is how the increments we raised it. Then we tried to talk them out of giving it to us because we're like, you're never going to see this money. So it was, but I think it's also, Rob and I are talking about this a little on the plane. It's like, I think you have to have the confidence to fail is actually the most important thing in being an entrepreneur. You have to feel like it's okay to fail. Then it's not as risky. And I think I certainly felt that. You felt that. It's sort of like, okay, there's a safety net that I can always go get a job, but I will have learned something. So for me, that was like business school or graduate school was starting my company, and I viewed it as it was probably not going to work, but if it didn't work, I could kind of go get a job.
Yeah, I mean, I think people, I get questions of people who are in the corporate world or in traditional businesses who want to either join a startup or start something themselves, and they sort of talk to me about their 5-year plan and want to figure out what, whether or not the risk is worthwhile, and investing in something versus starting something or joining a startup is a different approach. But you have to obviously weigh the factors of mortgages and kids and things like that. But I always encourage people to think about 5-year plans are oftentimes the results are very different anyway. So 12-month plans are actually 12 to 18 months are actually a better sort of approach, and I think that if you can put things in a context of 12 months, being an entrepreneur becomes much more palatable. And starting something and taking risk, whether you're starting a business or working at a startup or even taking a risk inside of a bigger company, taking that risk is much more palatable when you put it within those contexts. I think that in fact, when I left Launch and started my own company in 2002 or 2003. I remember saying to my wife, we have enough money for 12 months, and if it doesn't work, I'll go find a job. And I haven't had a job since, but that's the way that we looked at it. We had a mortgage, but we didn't have kids, so it was sort of like, okay, here's enough money to pay the mortgage, and we can go from there. And I think that's part of it, is sort of assessing the risk. You brought up sort of, one of the things it takes to be an entrepreneur. What do you think that people have sort of asked you and me about Silicon Valley and entrepreneurialism, and I have. One of the businesses I had was based both in LA and here. We worked a lot with Target stores. In fact, I then hired one of my business partners was the head of digital entertainment at Target and left and joined me. So there's some startup community here, some entrepreneurialism here. But what do you think dictates why Silicon Valley is hard to sort of replicate in other communities, other cities?
Yeah, I think there's entrepreneurs everywhere, and I've been very fortunate to. Up to SurveyMonkey, I've been all over the world in the last few years as we've been growing our business internationally, and I try to go talk to entrepreneurs when I'm in those countries. And there's the same kind of desire internationally as there is here to build, how do we create lots of great companies, great jobs? How do we do all these things? And I think the Bay Area is different than kind of anywhere else, both in this country and the world, in a couple of factors in creating companies, and one of those things is this sort of failure that I mentioned. That in a lot of cases, when people start companies and they fail, they are sort of looked down upon. And in Silicon Valley, it's almost the opposite. People are sort of, it's a badge of experience. It's expected that most companies fail. 90+% of all companies, startups fail. So, but somehow people don't recognize that elsewhere. But in Silicon Valley, it's not only recognized, but it's well accepted. And to some degree, you'd much rather bet on an entrepreneur who's had a failed startup than someone who hasn't. Because they've learned a lot, and they've gotten the lessons, and they know what they did wrong and what they could have done differently. And so sort of that acceptance and almost reward of failure is very different in Silicon Valley than elsewhere. And then the other thing, which is also very hard to replicate, is kind of the network of professionals, lawyers, accountants, PR firms, all the people around startups. They just behave differently in Silicon Valley, and they kind of are, in some ways, the keepers of institutional memory. Yeah, there's the history of how companies got started are resident in those people, and so when the next group of bright-eyed 25-year-olds come along with their next great idea, these are people who've seen hundreds of companies come through. And so I think other places in the world can take those two things and adapt them, but it takes a sort of change in attitude in the first case, and it takes building up that professional class around the entrepreneurs. People often think it's capital. I actually think capital is the least of the problems. So, Rob, you're in LA. I was in LA for a long time, sort of in and around the entertainment business. Lots of changes happen in the entertainment business. What do you think is going to happen over the next 5 to 10 years in the entertainment business?
5 to 10 years is a little farther than my crystal ball, but because it's easy to answer 10 years, but you just make things up. But I think that I guess I would love to see a show of hands of people who have done two things. One, who has DVRs, a TiVo, a DirecTV TVR at their house. All right, well over.
Good survey.
Exactly. Quality survey. Could have done that before. And who has watched in the last week or two watched video on their phones? All right, smaller number, but still good. I think those two things are going to sort of change the way that we consume entertainment over the next several years. I think that the having come from the music business and then now moving more into the entertainment business or the content business, the production business of film and television, you see the changes of what have been traditional sort of paths for distribution of content. So we go to movies and then we come home and watch a movie on there or something or a show on television. The way that the distribution is really going to be changed through broadband speed and through the connectivity to our lives. I mean, it is, everyone sort of talks about how amazing it is that you have what used to be a computer in your pocket on your phone. And I think that will truly change the way that we consume entertainment, both how we consume it, so you'll be able to watch whatever you want, wherever you want, which is a phrase that is used on a regular basis, but more importantly, how you pay for things and how you consume it will be, the business models will change pretty drastically. You will see companies like HBO and ESPN start charging a fee for directly paying for the content you want, so you'll be able to pay for those two things directly. They'll probably be the leaders in what's called over the top, so they will start to offer as many of their services as they can before the cable companies get mad at them, or too mad at them. They will offer those things, so you'll be able to stream ESPN anywhere, anytime, the actual ESPN, or watch whatever painful Vikings loss there is, you can watch at any point and anywhere. And that's a scary thing to the people who control the distribution. The business has grown up originally through FCC licenses and television, in terms of controlling access to distribution. And one of the great things, and one of the reasons why Dave has, sort of led me to this path, but why we're involved in digital media versus just traditional media, is that change creates opportunities for both businesses and for doing things in a different way that are better for the consumer and better for you as viewers and consumers. I think that you're going to see those changes hit the entertainment space and create new opportunities throughout the entertainment space. Semi-articulate.
No, that's fine. I mean, I think also, I just had to add to that, I think the first wave of the internet was really about just getting people online and getting them to figure out what to do online, but it was all about the online experience. And I think what you're seeing in this next wave is it's kind of the internet and technology are washing into every company and every business. And so I'm sure most people in this room, you can't say, oh, I don't have to think about the internet and technology in my business anymore, because it is part and parcel. I mean, whether it's farming, and Monsanto just bought a friend of mine's company for $1 billion in technology, to getting a cab with Uber, or renting a house. All these type of things, the real world is being impacted in a pretty dramatic way. And so I think in our little survey space that we play in, we think telephone polling is dying. This is not our main business. We just play around with it. Our main business is helping anybody survey their customers or their employees, etc. But we like to do some stuff, and it turns out that most people aren't going to answer their phones anymore for pollster calls, and so response rates for phone polling are dropping dramatically. They've gone from 36% in 1997 to 10% in 2012 in the election. And so we're trying to pilot other ways to help people do political polling, because what has always worked won't work. So I think we're seeing it sort of everywhere, that no one would have thought that everyone having a mobile phone would mean that people wouldn't take political polls. It's
right.
Sort of but when you can see who's calling you and you have to pay for it, you're not going to answer that call.
And to my point, creating new opportunities, we actually, not promoting this, but we did create an app recently that was launched called Show Off. You promote, you can download it. No, the app's called Show Off, and it is fantasy sports for television. So you can you'll be able to play your friends and family on what's going to happen on different shows. So predictions of what's going to happen next week on Scandal or different things. But the reason we did that's the consumer-facing part of it, where it's just fun, it's free, there's no betting, there's no cost, etc. But part of the reason we built the app is to actually then use the data and license the data back to the television networks, which they can't get through Nielsen and through other things as behaviors change. So the ability to acquire information. So we built this app partially for fun and for consumers to use it and play around with it, but the back end benefit is we know a lot about what people are watching and without having to ask them, without having to extract that data and pay for that access to that data. So as I sort of said, it creates new opportunities as well.
Yeah. Let's go to Blake. So we're back here. We've been back actually in school for a very long time. Thinking back, besides your bus exploits, what did you get from being at Blake that's been valuable to you?
I mean, I think we talked about this a little bit. One of the best things we got from the Woolmans, some Janice here, and other folks, but also beyond the teaching and administrative staff, but actually the people, the community, I guess, as a whole. You know, you can touch on this as well, but the two things were sort of problem solving and critical thinking in a way that is, it wasn't about, you know, grades were important. They were less important to me than they were to him. He was valedictorian. I made the top half of the class possible. I've saving that one for years. But as a result, but you know, but I think that actually says a lot. Is Blake created an environment where, you know, Dave truly took advantage of the academics and the opportunities there and went on to sort of continue to add to that. But I took advantage of a lot of different things, as I said, the cultural, the critical thinking, the approach to people and ideas as opposed to stature and status. So one of the major downsides of living in Los Angeles is the sort of the opposite effect and impact that wealth and status and things have on raising kids. I have 3 kids. And we talk about this, and my wife, who grew up in Atlanta, if it weren't for the winters, we'd probably be sitting there as well. And I think that you know, what Blake and the Blake community brought to us was the idea that people are more important than how much money they have or where they come from or what job title or anything like that. And I think that has carried through into my professional career in more ways than I can probably count. That sort of unconscious thinking of valuing what the ideas that come out of people's mouths as opposed to, as I said, who they are, how they dress, where they come from, or even their accents. As my father-in-law is from the South.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I would agree with those things, and I would sort of add, for me, probably the other thing that's gone with me is just my classmates and the people that a lot of them were here this morning very early, so thank you. But are still my friends and have helped me all along the way, and you know, encouraged me in my career and my family, and we're all still, you know, quite close, and I think that's really special. And when I tell some of my, you know, people I work with or my friends in Silicon Valley that I'm still in very close touch with a lot of my friends from high school, that people think that's amazing and odd, and I think maybe it is, I don't know, but it's the thing that sort of for me is carried with me, and obviously kind of great teachers as well, but I think the sort of bond, I think I had a picture that I put up here which was from, that I dug out from my old pictures, which was actually taken at Harvard, I think head of the Charles weekend one weekend, but it was like 15 of us from our class, and everyone had come to crash on my floor at Harvard. I don't think anyone slept. But that sort of is, I think, carried with me. I think the other question was posed to us before we got here by Anne, which was what kind of skills should we think schools and parents should focus on? So Rob and I both have kids. I have 2. Nate and Melanie, they will be, they're coming this afternoon, my wife, so we'll be at the homecoming game tonight. My son's very excited to see a high school football game, 9 and 7. So we live this. Our kids go to public school in Menlo Park, and we think about this all the time. I mean, I think obviously you want your kids to develop kind of critical thinking skills and creativity. I think those are super important, and they kind of get overlooked sometimes in schools. But I think more specific things that I think get left out. As you think about older kids, computer programming. I think computer programming is probably more important than learning a language. I think it is going to be even if you never become an actual programmer, it is going to be a skill that people are going to need to know. And if you decide you want to be a computer programmer, it happens to be a great career. So the difference we have about 450 people at SurveyMonkey. About a third of them are software engineers. The difference in starting pay for a software engineer that we hire right out of college versus someone who works in our marketing or sales team is more than double for the same kid graduating from college. We're paying kids graduating from Stanford computer science kind of almost $250,000 a year starting salary, and we can't get enough of them.
Right, that's the problem.
So that's not cash, that's cash and equity, so it's about half and half. But and by the way, you don't need to go to college to be a great programmer. It's kind of, we sort them through colleges, I think is probably the best way to describe it. But you don't need to be. And the other thing that I think, and not to disparage Mr. Vetcher at all, because he was a great math teacher, but less, I would say, on calculus and more on statistics. I just think statistics is like what you use every day. As we have more and more data to analyze in all of our daily jobs, like really understanding statistics is way more important than calculus. And I don't say calculus isn't important, but I never use my calculus, maybe because I wasn't that good at it, but I use statistics every day in my job. I teach my team statistics. We have literally like training courses in our office on statistics. So those would be like my two specific kind of call-outs. I don't know if you...
I mean, I would just add to the computer programming, and I come from sort of a creative side. We are creating original IP. That's what the Fresno is a content studio. So we're creating, for lack of a better description, television shows that will be distributed on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and other places. And a very traditional, in some ways, or creative side. And the thing that holds us back as a business is I can't find enough developers, no matter what the software developers, excuse me, to fund the businesses, to fund the things that we want to do. And I think, to reiterate, more important than learning a language, and more important than most things, is it's becoming the language of business in a lot of ways. As businesses continue to evolve, as Dave touched upon. And it's not about being able to write code. I will never know how to write code. Since our father dragged us to some computer programming class where we learned to type BASIC and learned to have our name run down the screen, that's the last time I ever learned how to write code. But being able to understand, in the same way that part of the value in business is understanding the business you're in and understanding the ins and outs of the various industries that you're in, computer programming and the basis of that is so important to so many different industries, and will become more and more so that it literally is becoming the language of business. And so knowing how to speak to people, knowing how to manage people, knowing how to assess whether or not your team is building something on time or will be 6 months late is a very important part of that. And I think that continues to impact. I mean, I spend a lot of time between different industries in terms of media and technology, but also one area of our businesses was actually working with Target stores a lot, and with Target and Best Buy being based here, the retail business is going to go through, and has already started to go through, a pretty retching change, some of which is a result of various companies having sort of excelled at what is sort of called e-commerce, but just consumption through and purchasing through various digital platforms. I think you can look at it at every part of both your lives, both in business and personal, as an essential part of understanding it. So that's what I would continue to reiterate that.
I think we've got a few more minutes. We'll take some questions from the audience. Feel free to address them to one or both of us, or anything anybody wants to ask. We're happy to try and take answers. Yeah.
Something I read or heard out of the Federal Reserve meeting the other day, they thought that this country innovation is on the downturn, and growth, GDP growth measured by GDP, will never make a comeback as strong as we were because we don't have the capability to grow at that rate any longer. Do you guys want to comment on that?
Well, I think it's a concern. Yeah, I'll repeat the question. So, the Federal Reserve came out the other day and said that innovation is declining in this country, that we're not going to have the sort of growth we've been used to because of that, and that it's a real problem for us going forward. I mean, I sort of think that while it is a concern, to me it's really driven by education. One of the biggest problems we have in this country is our educational system is broken. And most kids don't have the opportunity to go to an amazing school like Lake. And so what I spend my kind of work on in my nonprofit time is trying to help fix public education in this country through charter schools and other kind of initiatives. But I think a lot of that, the fear is that the innovation is going to move abroad, and I think that will happen if we have an immigration policy that sends some of the smartest people we've educated in this country, we send them home. We can't hire the people we need to hire because those people can't get visas or because we don't have the pool of educated people. So I think kind of at the core, it's an education problem. That being said, I think there's a lot of innovation, and in fact, we might have a little bit of overheated innovation going on in the Bay Area. Office space, talent are at kind of ridiculous sort of premiums right now. And so there is still, I think, it's encouraging if you come out to Silicon Valley and see what's happening there. People aren't really dreaming about how to reinvent the world. So I think there's a lot of it. I think it's more, do we have the infrastructure and the labor pool to kind of go execute on that innovation? But there's plenty of people thinking about it.
What do you think about the culture that's going up in South by Southwest?
I'm sorry,
South by Southwest.
What about
the culture that's growing up in
South by Southwest?
What do you think? How do you compare that to Silicon Valley? Is that
So the question was, how do I think about the culture of South by Southwest? And do you mean the music side or the technology side, or both?
Both, the technology side.
So South by Southwest versus Silicon Valley. And South by Southwest started 30 years ago as a music festival, music trade show really in Austin, Texas, and has grown into music, film, and technology. And the technology side has almost overtaken and overshadowed everything else, which sort of the music business continues to crater. I think that as we touched on before in terms of why Silicon Valley has challenged, I think that the community in Austin is and I think a lot of people obviously fly in for South by Southwest itself, but I think I love seeing entrepreneurs and people using the technology platforms available to them all over the world. And so I think that location, in fact, it pains me to even say it now, there's a phrase that is thrown out in the media of Silicon Beach, which is, we live in sort of the west side of Los Angeles, and there's Silicon Prairie, which is the sort of Austin and Texas side of it. And I think that the whole point of having digital connectivity is that you erase sort of geographical boundaries and limitations. And I think so to me, it's all part of the same sort of communities in a lot of ways. Obviously, you have to find local support and local teams and building teams, but I think that for the most part, I find it to be all part of one sort of movement forward. So
yeah, I think there's some interesting pockets of real innovation in internet and software development. Austin's one of them. Utah, Salt Lake City, obviously Seattle, LA, San Francisco. And New York is trying, although I think really it's sort of like you need great programming talent. And one of the problems in a place like New York is there's a lot of people who want to live there, there's a lot of smart people, but a lot of the great programming talent got sucked up by the banks. That's because they were always the ones that could afford to pay people a lot of money, and they need technology. They have become technology companies too. And so there hasn't been for startups that kind of pool of engineering software development talent. If you think about, we run a manufacturing process, if you will, but our manufacturing process is software development. And the most critical part of that process, we have to obviously design and figure out what we're building, and then we have to build it, and then we have to make sure that it actually operates correctly. But the bottleneck in the middle is the people that actually write the code and the software developers. And you can't get those people, you can't do all the rest of it.
Right. John?
To your point earlier about the massive, in Silicon Valley, the Bay Area, massive amount of talent being highs, what do you feel about the massive valuations being paid for the startups? And in case Alibaba goes public today, biggest IPO ever. I mean, are we kind of getting close to that?
Yeah, so the question is, there's just kind of massive valuations being paid for startups in Silicon Valley. Alibaba is going public today, which is the biggest IPO ever. Are things kind of getting too crazy? I think the answer is sort of. It's not kind of where we saw in like 2000, where there were companies going public with no revenue and no hopes of any revenue and being worth billions of dollars. So it's not, on a relative basis. But yes, there is too much capital flowing in. There are too many companies getting valued too highly. A lot of them won't work. I think, probably usually takes somewhat of a stock market correction first in the public markets, and then that feeds back into the private markets to kind of cool things down. So our friend Bill Gurley, who's a partner at Benchmark, was in the Wall Street Journal on Monday talking about this. Venture capitalists have a reason to talk down valuations. The cheaper companies are, the better it is for their investments. But I think a lot of what he said was the truth, in that things are getting kind of a little too crazy, and we will see some high-profile kind of crashing and burning in the next 12 months.
But the only thing I would add to that is that I agree. The difference between sort of the first .com bubble and boom, and Dave pointed that out, companies going public, but also just what the companies are and what they're doing. We talked about, especially from the entertainment side, in the content side, it was before we were building the box and the programming that ran in the box, so to speak. And now you have this platform of technology. You have, someone made a point that
and you can reach a global audience almost instantaneously.
Right. In 1999 there were something like 100, and I think the number is 129 million homes in North America with broadband. And now there's 1.3 billion people with broadband smartphones. And so you think about the opportunities to do things, and the opportunities, you no longer are trying to dig the road, let alone drive the car down it. So I think that creates opportunities. So companies like Uber, is it a $17 billion company? Is it a $2 billion company? At least it's a company that actually, people in this room have used on a day-to-day basis. My mother can use it, and that's a good sort of opportunity for them. We make fun of her at some points, but I don't mean. But when people of all ages can pull open their phone and do things, those companies actually have a much more practical and much sort of longer roadmap, and whether or not the valuations themselves are actually accurate.
Please comment on one or two of your favorite or most unusual surveys.
So our favorite or most unusual surveys. So we get about 80 million completed survey responses a month. So we don't know all of our most interesting ones. But we, in the last couple of years, we've built a new product we call Survey Monkey Audience, which allows our customers to buy responses from people who are willing to take surveys for charity. So we've signed up about 4 million people to take surveys for charity. We don't pay them, but we make a charitable donation to a charity that they choose. And so there we get to see a little bit more of what people are doing. So we work with a lot of media outlets on those type of things. And so there's a guy named Nate Silver who used to be at the New York Times and now has a site that is partnered with ESPN and ABC News called 538. And he does a lot of interesting things with data. And so we recently ran a survey for him on people's favorite Star Wars characters. But we ran it in the way you'd run a political survey, so favorable, unfavorable. And then the Washington Post took that and matched it up with the 2016 presidential candidates to see how they ranked versus the Star Wars characters. And it turns out Darth Vader would beat all the 2016 candidates. I think Marco Rubio and Emperor Palpatine were about tied, and only Jar Jar Binks was really down at the bottom with Rick Santorum. So that was kind of fun, and Stephen Colbert did a piece on it. It's called Darth Vader for President. So those are kind of fun things. But we have people doing all sorts of things. We had dissidents in Russia a couple of years ago when there was the protest movement against Putin. We had 100,000 people use one of our surveys to figure out who should run against Putin from the dissidents. And we didn't know what it was, to be honest with you. It's in Russian, obviously. But we got a story was written about it in a Russian newspaper with a link to our survey in it. And we got attacked by Russian hackers that are government sponsored who wanted the survey to come down. And that's how we found the survey. So, and as soon as we took it down, they left us alone. But it was a very sophisticated attack. So those are kind of the things you don't really think about. Had to sort of ask the State Department to kind of get involved and see if we have a business in Russia, we have customers in Russia. We, despite the issues in Russia, it's actually a nice growing market for us. So we want to be able to continue to do work in Russia. So, but our customers can create whatever sort of surveys they want. So,
See, there are more questions out there. I just want to point out that we are, because of the quality of the program, we're running way over time.
Sorry.
If anyone needs to get up and leave, feel free to do so. We're family, we can be informal. But otherwise, I think we take about 2 more questions.
Sure. Well, we'll be hanging around a little bit afterwards.
There was another question out right there. Yeah.
Let's go back to education. What do you see as the opportunity to help close this achievement gap? You've got great education, and you've got great knowledge about technology. What do you see as the opportunity to close that gap?
So the question was, what do you see? How do you use technology to help close the education gap? What's the ability? What are the opportunities?
I mean, you can answer too. I think there's some really interesting and exciting things going on in education technology. And some of them are going to be things that students use directly, and some of the things are going to make schools better. So at New Schools Venture Fund, we have an ed tech fund. We've seeded a lot of education entrepreneurs, even though we're a nonprofit. Some of them are nonprofit, some of them are for-profit companies, but people doing all sorts of things to enable the classroom and schools to become much more efficient in what they do. There's a couple of, I can kind of go on and on about some of the things, but there's a company I'm invested in called Teachers Paying Teachers, which is essentially a marketplace for teachers to sell their lesson plans to other teachers, which wasn't possible before, but it turns out, there's some great teachers out there, and they have great lesson plans, and there's a lot of teachers who don't know how to do a good lesson plan, and so we can get the best lesson plans to a lot more teachers, and it's a marketplace, and there are some teachers who have become recognized as some of the best teachers in the country with their lesson plans. These teachers are actually making hundreds of thousands of dollars selling their lesson plans to other teachers, but we're also improving the quality of what kids are getting in school. So I think technology can play a role. I don't think it's the only answer. I think that would be nice if it was. But it's part of it. I think it's, we have a lot of issues in education. Governance is probably the biggest one. We know actually how to fix really broken schools. We just haven't had the political will to do it. If anyone wants to see a great public school, go visit the KIPP school here in Minneapolis. I know a bunch of people probably in this room have been involved. The Nelson and Carlson family has been very deeply involved, I know, in that school, and it's an amazing school to see, and you can take kids from very poor parts of the city, and these kids are doing incredible work, a year ahead in math, etc., even versus sort of top suburban schools. So it's a combination of things, but we have a lot of work to do. Maybe one more question, I think. Back there.
To piggyback on that question, I'm in Southern California. positive or negative to children out of the school?
Yeah, I mean, I think the technology stuff to sort of enable you to do things not in the classroom is really coming. If you've seen Khan Academy, I mean, it's pretty impressive what you can learn, and we're seeing what these people are calling blended schools or flipped classrooms, where the kids are actually doing their homework in school, right, and they're watching their lessons out of school on video. So you can sort of take that same sort of analogy, if you will, to homeschooling, and you're going to be able to watch some of the best teachers on video in the country. I think those are really interesting ideas. I still think there's a lot of value to the kind of community that you get in a school, but in a lot of those bad schools, kids would be better off watching videos and doing their own work than being in those schools. So it's great if you have a school like Blake with the community that we have here. I'm not so sure it's always that great. LAUSD is probably one of the worst school districts in the country.
Our kids go to a K through 6 independent school in Los Angeles, and we chose to send them because the school, Santa Monica Malibu school system, was not what we felt was good enough for an opportunity. But I think our kids do both learn to code in 4th grade. My 4th grader is starting to learn to code, but she's also but they do what they call looping and the flipped classroom, where the teachers post the lessons online, and then they come in and do math and science homework in the class in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. I think Dave touched on it. The biggest sort of missed opportunity in homeschooling, I think, is the community and the critical thinking, the exchange of ideas. It's very difficult to exchange ideas. You can learn new things, but you can't then learn. It's much harder to express the ideas that you have without peers around you to exchange those ideas and challenge you and learn. Different people think differently, and therefore, how do you open your own mind up by one of your peers or classmates sort of exchanging an idea with you or challenging your version of it? I think that's one of the things that's sort of missing in the homeschooling opportunity. There are obviously exceptions and ways that it can be beneficial, but I think that's probably the biggest missing link, is teaching people to work. And then secondly, the networking, which we touched upon, is one of the biggest things that we love about Blake and learning about ideas. You don't develop those skills early, you don't develop those skills at all in some ways, and I think it weakens you as an adult if you don't have the ability to sort of interact with people at various levels. So
I think we got to cut it off at that point.
Tonight we have a great Blake get-together. It's basically